All right, so we are going to read book 17, The Beggar at the Manor. In the textbook version, the virtual text version, it's really short. There's a little bit more to it in the graphic novel version if you're interested, and I'll put the page numbers on your agenda. It starts on page 174, and there's a little bit more to it in here if you want to look at it in here. All right, but I'm going to go over it from the textbook. Book 17, Beggar at the Manor. Remember, the beggar is Odysseus because he is still dressed in that disguise. He revealed himself to Telemachus, but the swineherd has no idea who he is, and so now he's going to be approaching his home disguised as a beggar for his own safety. Telemachus returns home, and Odysseus and the swineherd soon follow. Odysseus is still disguised as a beggar. All right, so Odysseus is walking. Imagine him like walking on the road to enter his house. It's an ancient Greek village. And he's speaking, and someone hears his voice and recognizes it. While he spoke, an old hound lying near pricked up his ears and lifted up his muzzle. So there's a dog lying there. His ears go up, lifts up its head. This was Argos, trained as a puppy by Odysseus, but never taken on a hunt before his master sailed for Troy. So this dog is 20 years old. It was a puppy when Odysseus left. The young men afterwards hunted wild goats with him and hare and deer, but he had grown old in his master's absence. So young men in the town of Ithaca, they, took the dog on hunts, but now it's 20 years later. Treated as rubbish now. Rubbish means trash, so he's not treated very well. He lay at last upon a mass of dung before the gates. Manure of mules and cows piled there until field hands could spread it on the king's estate. He's lying on a pile of poop. I mean, dogs like stinky things, and it's probably soft, but he's a very old dog lying on a big pile of manure. Abandoned there and half destroyed with flies, old Argos lay. But when he knew he heard Odysseus' voice nearby, he did his best to wag his tail, nose down with flattened ears, having no strength to move nearer his master. So if you have a pet dog, or like you have friends who do, like when they're really excited to see you, they'll kind of pull their ears back and they wiggle. So Argos is like this really old dog, but he's excited. So he's kind of trying to show that. And the man looked away, wiping a salt tear from his cheek, but hid this from Eumaeus. So Odysseus sees, recognizes, knows the dog recognizes him. He can't reveal himself because he would be endangered because of all these suitors. So he just kind of has to compose himself. And then he starts talking to Eumaeus, the swineherd. I marvel that they leave this hound to lie here on the dung pile. He would have been a fine dog from the look of him, though I can't say to his power and speed when he was young. You find the same good build in house dogs. Table dogs landowners keep all for style. So Odysseus is like, this looks like a really good dog, like the kind of dog you would keep in your house just as a pet. What's going on with this dog? Why is he outside? And you replied, Eumaeus, a hunter owned him, but the man is dead in some far place. If this old hound could show, this is a picture of Odysseus dressed as a beggar approaching Argos, the old dog. If this old hound could show the form he had when Lord Odysseus left him going to Troy, you'd see him swift and strong. He never shrank from any savage thing he brought to bay in the deep woods. So he was a hunting dog, and he would corner whatever they were hunting, and he was not afraid. On the scent no other dog kept up with him. Now misery has him in leash. His owner died abroad, and here the women slaves will take no care of him. So Eumaeus thinks that Odysseus died. I mean, it's been 20 years. That's kind of like what people are assuming at this point. You know how servants are. Without a master, they have no will to labor or excel. For Zeus, who views the wide world, takes away half the manhood of a man the day he goes into captivity and slavery. So this is an interesting comment the swineherd makes about people who are enslaved, that Zeus has taken away half of their manhood. It's sort of a strange comment, but I think it does point at a truth about the dehumanizing power of slavery. Now, just a quick note on slavery here. Most cultures at some point or another kept slaves. And in ancient Greece and Ithaca, people who were enslaved would probably have been people who were captured at war. So, like the Greeks were at war with the Trojans. They're at war with all sorts of places around them. They would capture people and keep them as slaves. And maybe sometimes people who were being punished for some reason would be enslaved. So when they're talking about slaves, that's who they're talking about. Whoops. Eumaeus crossed the court and went straight ahead into the Megaron among the suitors. Megaron, that sounds exciting. And it tells us in the margin, the main hall of a palace or house. So we've been talking about there being 100 suitors in Odysseus's house. So where they are is in this big hall. And when we say hall, it's not like a hallway. It's like a big banquet hall, like a big space where you would have events. Like maybe think about like the school's cafeteria if you took the tables out. Think of like, a place where maybe you've gone where people have weddings or you have other kind of like gatherings. But this would be, it's in a palace. So it's just like a giant big room in the palace. Eumaeus crossed the court and went straight forward into the Megaron among the suitors. But death and darkness in that instant closed the eyes of Argos, who had seen his master, Odysseus, after 20 years. So Odysseus' old dog Argos, after seeing him, after 20 years away, he now lets go and dies. It's like he's been guarding his master's house this whole time. And the graphic novel actually does something really sweet with this. If you're a dog person, they show, and this is on page 177, it has a drawing of Athena lifting Argus's spirit and taking him away. Odysseus enters his home as a beggar, and the suitors mock and abuse him. So these mean men filling his home see this beggar, treat him poorly. That's not what you're supposed to do to a guest, but they're bad anyway. Penelope asks to speak with the beggar, but Odysseus pushes her off until nightfall. So now Odysseus is home. He's seeing his wife for the first time in 20 years, but he hasn't revealed himself. What do we think will happen? We will find out next week.